Hello, and welcome along to the latest episode of Rovers Chat. I'm joined as ever by Robbie Andrews of Radio Sheffield. Robbie, how are we doing?
Yeah, really good, Ricky. Thank you.
Good stuff. It's been a while, hasn't it, since we last did one of these. Not much festive cheer, though, in supply at Rovers at the minute. I mean, let's get straight into it then. Plymouth, obviously, at the weekend, third straight league loss. But, I mean, don't think anybody kind of saw that performance, certainly not the result coming, did they? 5-1 at home. You've got to go back a while for the last, result, I suppose, or even performance as kind of low as that.
Yeah, it was an awful afternoon, pretty much from the minute Brandon Hanlon had put Rovers in front. It peaked there, didn't it, and went downhill from that point on. I think it was so surprising, given how well Rovers had done the week before against Cardiff and put a really good show on, and albeit in defeat really late on in that one. Afterwards, I think everybody was walking away thinking, all right, yeah, okay, Doncaster Rovers have lost that game, but there's a lot to take from it. 3 goals against the league leaders. Yes, defensively still frail, but coming off the back of that, you're going into a game against Plymouth, a team who are below you in the table. I know Grant McCann said afterwards that, they're a team who've spent a lot of money, just come down from the Championship. Yes, they have. However, they're clearly vulnerable given the position they were in the table. And when Brandon Hanlon scores, you think, okay, great start. They've carried on the momentum in front of goal that they had last week. But as soon as Plymouth equalised, there was only really one team in it. And again, yes, Laurent Talai is a £1 million striker. He's probably worth more than that now. But Rovers players just seem to be scratching their heads, looking around at each other, almost waiting for somebody to help them out, looking across at Grant McCann, waiting for him to do something to change things. There was no real grasping of the nettle to try and turn things around in that game. And I think probably summed up by a very passive and pedestrian-like second half performance at 3-1 down. There was never really any sort of spark to suggest that Rovers might get something out of it. There was a long time between Plymouth's third and their fourth, probably a good hour or so, I think, in general. But in between that, I struggle to remember really anything happening of note at either end. I mean, Plymouth were pretty happy at 3-1. Rovers just struggling to gain any sort of momentum. The substitutes weren't really doing anything to halt the flow. And yeah, a disastrous afternoon, and one that is by far, I think, the most worrying of the season so far.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of feeds in, doesn't it? The run they've been on, one winning foot. That's league games, 14 league games. Even speaking to Grant afterwards, we were both chatting to him, and it was really low, weren't he? Sometimes you're not sure what to expect with Grant, whether it's going to be, kind of come out fighting, or is he going to be harsh on his players? And he just low, didn't he?
Yeah, he was very, very deflated, and I think he sort of suggested that he had a lot of thinking to do this week. I think that's more about how he gets the best out of the players at his disposal than anything else. I think he was almost looking at that team, a team that lacked belief, but we know that doesn't come from the manager. We know that he is, one of the most front-footed managers in that division. He will want his players to go out there and impose themselves on the opposition. He was very honest with us. It's hard, isn't it, to be too critical of a manager who's achieved so much at one club in 2 spells. But even he admitted that he's not himself at the minute. He's not getting the best out of the players he's got. And I think I asked him afterwards, sort of said to him, listen, you've defended these players a lot this season, last season, the season before. A lot of these players were there at that point. And it's about time 1 or 2 of them did start showing a bit more faith, repaying that faith in the manager, because there's too many who are shirking the responsibility a little bit, I think. And, Grant McCann will know that. He won't come out and say it. But 1 win in 14, there's been a couple of times where Grant said, I feel like we've turned a corner. I feel like we're building. And it has seemed like that. I think Reading in the league, where then they went and beat Crewe, but then they lost against Barnsley and they're back to where they started. They picked up 1 or 2 decent results. They beat Peterborough. Again, we've said they got a decent point at Stevenage, but then they lose another game. And it's so many, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And ultimately, Rovers find themselves second bottom of the table, heading into a Boxing Day clash against Blackpool, who are also in the bottom 4. So they can't find any sort of consistency at the moment. And the problems, at some point, have got to sort themselves out, haven't they? Because otherwise, Rovers are heading for a very difficult second half of the campaign.
Well, that's it. It's that run sequence there, 14 games without 1 win in 14. That's a third of the season, isn't it? If you were to kind of repeat that across three strands, that's not relegate. That's bottom of the league form, isn't it? Across a full season. Sorry. And yeah, and we've spoken about this before, haven't we, about Grant? I think if it was any other manager, possibly at any other club, they'd have possibly major questions would have been asked by now. Possibly might have even gone by now with this run. But I think he's got, everyone says, credit in the bank, which he has, and then rightly so. But it's not in an endless supply, that is it. He'll know that he can't live off that. That has to at some point be rectified.
And football's a results-based business, isn't it? Grant knows that. He's been at clubs before where he's struggled for results. Hull and Peterborough at different stages. I know he sort of won the league at Hull as well, but difficult spells either side of that. And he'll be the first to admit that results have been nowhere near good enough. There's been the odd performance. I mean, other than Plymouth, Rovers have been in quite a lot of games without ever really looking like winning some of them. But he will know, when his head hits the pillow, that this run's nowhere near good enough. 1 win in 14, especially when the way Rovers started the campaign, they looked like they were going to take to League One, I guess, water. But since then, they've really struggled to adapt to the level. The big players from last season, Owen Bailey aside, aren't really setting the world alight. And yeah, it's strange, isn't it, when you look at the makeup of the League One at the moment, and the bottom two are the two teams two of the teams promoted from League Two last season, which says, well, is there a gap between League Two and League One? But when you look at Bradford, I know they got beat at the weekend, but they've had a very good start or very good half a campaign so far. So, yeah, a couple of teams have really struggled to adapt to the third tier, and they happen to be the bottom two in the table at the moment.
Yeah, it's like you said, especially considering the start they made. I think mid-September they'd won 8 of the first 10 in all comps. The only defeat they had was Huddersfield, which was we were both there. They should have been out of sight at half time even there. And the drop off's just been mad, really, hasn't it? And getting on for 3 months now, isn't it? It's actually over 3 months actually. So yeah, I mean, I did a piece earlier on today about kind of all the problems at the minute that's going on, and I think one of them, a lot of fans have highlighted it, is the recruitment in the summer. I mean, 10 signings, half of them were loans, half of them permanent. But of those 5 permanent, none of them have nailed a place, have they? In a starting 11. I think Pearson's played. Excuse me. I think Pearson's played 11, started 11 in the league, and aside from that, it's kind of slim pickings.
Yeah, there's not been anybody who's really grabbed the shirt and ran with it. I know Brandon Hanlon has scored a couple recently, but up until that point, he'd struggled to make matchday squads on occasion, hadn't he? And yeah, I think the recruitment hasn't quite got off the ground as would have been hoped. I think the majority of the loans haven't played their part, really. Lotatala and O'Riordan aside, Charlie Crew, up until recently, had barely featured since a couple of appearances when he first rejoined. Damola Ajayi's not played much other than in the cup competitions, and Tiosi Olasanya's loan has never really got started, has it? But for a couple of performances behind closed doors that don't really have any impact. But yeah, you wouldn't be surprised if there's a fair old turnaround, certainly in loanees in January. The likes of Olasanya, well, it doesn't really make any sense for him still to be at Doncaster Rovers in the second half of the campaign and taking up a loan spot that he's not really being used. I know he's had his injury problems as well at stages, but yeah, really the team, for the most part, recently at least, is a lot of players who were involved last season. And this is what we're saying, isn't it, about that step up, some not quite taking to the level as you would have hoped. I think when you look at some of the results at home in particular, I mean, drawing against Burton, losing against Wimbledon, losing against Northampton, losing a tight South Yorkshire derby against Barnsley, having got themselves back into it at half-time. The result on Saturday, some of the worst performances, Rovers, I think, have actually come at home, which is arguably the most worrying thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and obviously the run that we kind of alluded to earlier, this festive batch of games, it's not actually that, it's not too dissimilar from a normal, 4 games in 10 days isn't, out the norm, is it really, in the heat of a season when you've got a Saturday, Tuesday. So I think people do over-egg the pudding a bit when they've gone on about the festive run of games. I know it's not ideal, but it's still not. It's not 4 in 9 days, is it? Which I think was a good few years back now since they've change that. But yes, a 4 in 12, so 4 in 10 even. Blackpool and Stockport away. I mean, how do you kind of see them going?
Well, the Rovers' best performance of late has come against the league leaders, so I would imagine they'll go to Stockport and probably put in a really good account of themselves. I wouldn't be shocked at that at all. I think that game against Blackpool is absolutely massive, isn't it? And I know Grant McCann will say that every game at this stage is big. We don't look at the league table until it's March, April, May. But when you've lost against Plymouth like you have, if you lose ground on another team in and around you, Blackpool climbed above Rovers, didn't they, with the win in the early kickoff against Wigan on Saturday. That put Rovers in the bottom 4. So you're already psychologically thinking, oh, hang on, could do with a result here to get out of it. All of a sudden, second bottom, you go into the team directly above you, third bottom, Boxing Day at Bloomfield Road. It's never a nice place to go. It always seems to be horrible weather at Bloomfield Road, doesn't it? I've been to a game there before where it was called off an hour before kickoff with a waterlogged pitch. Anything can happen there. It's a swirling wind. It's not the type of game where, if you're a team low on confidence and maybe going in a bit cautiously, you can come away from that having been punished. I think Rovers need to go there. Perhaps the team, when it comes out, you wouldn't be surprised if it's very physical. If there's some big men in there, do Rovers go 3 at the back, play 3 big centre halves to sort of try and combat that physical threat of Blackpool? Who knows? But I think you've got those 2 big away games, then you've got 2 home games where Rovers need to be coming away with, if they can come away with a couple of wins in those 4, just to, reassure everybody that they're up for this fight and they can get out of it. Albeit, it's the first few days really of the season where they've been in the relegation zone, isn't it? So it's easy to panic, but I think after a performance like that on Saturday, you can see why people would. I think having a game like Blackpool away straight off the back of it is almost like, right, okay, can you show a response in this one? And what better way to do it? If Rovers can come away on Boxing Day with 3 points in the bag, that'd just put everybody's mind at rest a little bit.
Yeah, I think, like you said earlier, it'd be interesting to see what kind of setup he goes, because it's last season he kind of, during that run they had the season before, the 10-game winning streak, it was, barring injuries, you could name the team, couldn't you, effectively from 1 to 11. I know he changed tack last season with the kind of horses for courses approach, which a lot of people criticise. I mean, it worked in the end, didn't it? But he's kind of kept that now, hasn't he? And it's hard to guess what team they're going to. I mean, Saturday was a prime example, weren't it? They played well at Cardiff in terms of going forward, scored 3 goals. I know defensively they weren't amazing, but that setup looked all right to me in terms of they scored 3 goals. I couldn't tell you the last time they did that in the league prior to Cardiff. And then he just completely, changes back to the 4, the traditional setup 4-2-3-1. Crew's not in the squad. O'Riordan not in the squad. A few others questionable, I guess, decisions. I mean, I don't exactly know what formation they were playing at times at Cardiff, but it was working, weren't it, to an extent?
Yeah, it was that. I think the box midfield is probably the best way to describe it, wasn't it? Where
all centre mids, weren't it?
Yeah, so Close, Clifton, Crew and Bailey were all on the pitch at the same time, all very tight, compact, winning the ball back, breaking through lines, making things happen. There was a lack of width, I think, at times, which you're going to get if you've got all 4 central players. And I agree. I think when I saw the team sheet on Saturday and Close was on the bench and Crew wasn't in the squad, it was a surprise. I mean, fair enough, change it for your opposition, but you're at home. Charlie Crew arguably is your best ball-playing midfielder. So you're thinking you're going to have a lot of the ball. Maybe he could, and maybe Grant McCann might think now, maybe Crew should have been involved. But he's the manager; he gets paid to make those decisions, doesn't he? And he decided to make those alterations. But I think, I do. It's happened over the past couple of years, hasn't it? Where maybe up until February, March time, Grant's managing the squad and still working out maybe what his best team is. It does seem to be that once we get to a February, March time, you tend to see a lot more consistency in team selection, and he's almost worked out who we can rely on and who can play week in, week out and deliver. And maybe we'll see that again once he's had a chance to have a little play around in January. Maybe we'll see a lot more consistency in team selection for the second half of the campaign as well. Yeah,
that's a nice segue actually into the final topic then. So January, I mean, we're only 9-10 days away from the window opening. I think it's probably it's evident there's going to be loans, effectively swapping some loans around, isn't it? Olasanya and Ajayi, be staggered if either of them still there in mid-January, and possibly Crew. There's a few others in there, but it's effectively going to be loans coming in. So where do you think are the key areas?
Well, I think it's difficult in terms of areas, but I think one of the key attributes and qualities Rovers need is experience. I think the team have often gone under a little bit in games where Cardiff, for example, last minute, you think that's a great point if you can hold on. You can draw 3-3 at the league leaders. There's a couple of different errors whether it's physically or mentally. I think if Rovers can get one or two players in who've just seen it and done it at that level before. It's difficult in January because, as you said, the likelihood is that the majority of the incomings would be loans. So people with experience don't tend to come on loan, do they? You're going to have to sort of work out a deal for those. And, whether that can be done remains to be seen. I think Rovers are maybe one or two short in the wide areas / for, up front. I think when you look at it, they've not really got that different type of striker to run in behind. They haven't really got anybody to come in and for Molineux on the right. Middleton's drifted out of things really recently, hasn't he? Not been used as much as he was in the first sort of quarter of quarter of the campaign. So I think there are areas. Centre half, I think they could do with a bit of leadership in there. It is some of the goals. I think strikers tend to enjoy playing against Rovers. There's a reason why Rovers have conceded the most goals in the division. I know it's easy to say when there's 9 gone in the last 2 games, but Rovers have, I think, third lowest scorers, joint third lowest, and they've conceded the most in the division. So both penalty areas, whether it's centre half, whether it's striker, those areas need to be addressed. And if it is replacing loans with loans, so be it. Rob Street, for example, has been arguably Rovers' best signing of any transfer window in recent years. He was on loan. He scored a bucket load of goals and won them promotion. If they get anybody like him in the January window, that'll save them and keep them in League One for another season. But I think, positions will be decided. But I think that key quality is that bit of experience, just somebody who can lead them around the park, as well as Owen Bailey, as well as, your different players out there, because he's been brilliant. Bailey, Sterry, when he's played, has been good as well. But you need more. You need players around him to sort of help him out and be that ally on the pitch and really get Rovers through games.
And obviously, in terms of incomings, and I suppose the important thing as well, not that we've got any knowledge of it, but you don't want to be losing your Bailey or your Molineux, because I think they're the obvious two, aren't they? The kind of standout players that will be attracting interest. People, vultures will probably be looking and thinking, right, could we get a sneaky bid in? And maybe in years gone by that would have been accepted, but I think the stance now is, these aren't for sale, these players, but there's always everyone's got a price, haven't they? Yeah,
you took the words right out of my mouth, Ricky. I don't think Rovers are actively looking to sell any of their star assets, but the reason they've tied them down to longer term contracts is to protect what they've got, isn't it? And if somebody does want them, they're going to have to pay decent money to get them. I think Luke Molineux, although he's not had the goals he would have liked, in recent weeks he's added 1 or 2 more goal contributions to his name, an assist at Cardiff, an assist for Hanlon on Saturday. Owen Bailey's been absolutely brilliant, hasn't he? 9 goals from midfield. You still wouldn't be surprised in games if he pops up right side centre half or wherever. He can literally play anywhere. But 9 goals from midfield in all competitions is outstanding. I mean, and they're all different types. I know a lot of them are headers, but different types of headers as well, if that makes sense. Arriving late and different little finishes. He's certainly added that to his game, and that will naturally attract him to other teams. There'll be a lot of League One teams looking around who think, Owen Bailey would be a great signing. Thankfully, he signed a long-term deal at Rovers not too long ago, so Rovers are protected in that sense. But he'll be ambitious as well. He'll want to be climbing up that League One table and making sure that, having worked so hard to get out of League Two, Doncaster Rovers aren't in a position come April, May, where they're thinking they might fall back through that trapdoor and into the 4th tier again.